Hi, this is AP Lit, and we're going to look at the workbook. Turn to the very end of it, and I may have told you this, but a week from today, we're going to do the first 20 words. So there's a glossary back here, 313. You might want to make flashcards. I don't know, I used to have people define them. I think there's value, great value. Remember, I'm advocating, and they're advocating that you write things down. That you take notes, that you annotate. So they believe, the people downstairs in art, Ms. Fairburn, they encourage their students. It's just a common sense thing. If you write it down, some of you have photographic memories, I do not. Most of us have to write something down in order to remember it. So that's the only problem here. If you don't write it and you just stare at this for the next week, you may not learn it. I like it because these are the definitions. What we need to do is maybe add some examples. They do a pretty good job with the examples, and you need a book. Anybody else need a book? Okay, sorry.
Mine's in my locker. Can I go?
Yeah, you would. Yeah, these are yours. So, there's a lot in there. We actually read the first several pages. I may have mentioned that. It gives some really good ideas about what you have to do well, so I'll encourage you to read the introduction.
How many is
Yeah,
there?
we're going to do 20. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
After bibliography.
Yeah, let's just do 20. Maybe we need to up it to 25 next time. We just want to make sure we get through it. So this is, I don't want to write in this. Make sure I didn't write in yours. Make sure it's not written in.
Page are we on next? 313.
All right, so we're going to do through bibliography. Some of these you know. We may have to add some examples. We won't talk about it today, but probably need to look at them and talk about them at some point between now and next week. And we'll do these pretty regularly. Remember, this is number one on their list, is knowing the terms. Knowing all these terms back here, and these are just samples. I mean, there are probably dozens, hundreds more probably if you looked hard enough and thought about it. So we want to know at least the ones that they suggest we need to know. And you'll need to know what the word means. You probably have to give me that definition. So prepare to give me the definition and an example if we have one. Some of these do not. It mentions like apostrophe. We're gonna the first poet that except for the one we're gonna do today, the first poet, like every poem we'll read has an apostrophe in it. So we need to know what an apostrophe is and use one of those examples. So anyway, we could spend some time on this, and I intend to. Any questions about that? All right, so don't forget you have a paper due Thursday. So ideally, I can finish these papers before I get those papers. And Elizabeth and Madison, we need to talk about that paper that we wrote Friday before we left. I think everybody else was here. All right, any questions about that? All right, yes.
Do we have to turn in the paper to you?
Yeah, hard copy. Yeah. Yeah, I'll take the copy. I was able to read them yesterday. I know there are other ways to do it. Dr. Betzel next year, I think will take them electronically, but I think somehow I like it in my hand, and I get a red pen, and I've written liberally on your papers. So there's a lot there. Try to encourage you, and also what I've noticed so far is the quality of the. Remember, one of the points they make is the quality of the examples. And so I remember one paper. It has some examples, but for instance, somebody mentioned that. What was the context? Yeah, she accused lots of people. It was Abigail. She accused lots of people. That was all I got. Okay, there are lots of people. This is like a big red flag saying, who are those people? Give me examples of those people. You know, they accuse lots of people is not enough. I wrote on there, please give examples. And somebody else gave, really the other point that I noticed is all 3 points are basically the same. You know, you wanted to say something, you pick Abigail, whatever, and you don't know what I'm talking about. But, you know, the 3 points they made were all basically the same point said 3 different ways. That's not the same thing as 3 distinct points. So those are things we just, you know, it's been a long summer, a long time since you wrote a paper. Those are the kind of things we need to work on, that you say 3 distinct, separate things, all related by the topic or the thesis, but not repeating the same thing. Sometimes it sounds like it's different, but it's really not. So I'd like to start really with our view of poetry. There's so much in the book. If you have your poetry book, this is in there, but I'm going to give this to you anyway. This is a copy of it. Well, you don't really need it, since I'm going to give you I'm just telling you, it's also in your book. What I typically do is give you a list of questions, and you, since you have the book, but for some reason, you're going to get both here.
Thank you.
Come on, Steve. We're not out of the woods. We're not out of the woods. A long way to go.
Can only get worse.
All right, so here's a poem entitled Jerusalem. It's from a longer work. Usually that's the case. Poets, they don't publish individual poems usually, unless it's in the newspaper or some magazine. They certainly aren't. They're usually a part of collections. There's apparently a longer collection about Milton. I'm going to read it to you, then I'm going to ask you to read it again with a pencil, and I actually have something to show you when we're done with it. Maybe 2 things. It's called, well, it actually has 2 names. Jerusalem is, I guess, the official title, but sometimes you'll hear it called "And Did Those Feet in Ancient Times?" So they are both the same poem. Let me read it. And did those feet in ancient time walk upon England's mountains green? And was the Holy Lamb of God on England's pleasant pastures seen? And did the countenance divine shine forth upon our clouded hills? And was Jerusalem builded here among these dark satanic mills? Bring me my bow of burning gold, bring me my arrows of desire, bring me my spear, O clouds unfold, bring me my chariot of fire. I will not cease from mental fight, nor shall my sword sleep in my hand, till we have built Jerusalem in England's green and pleasant land. Let me tell you one thing about this. This is based on a legend. If you know Scripture, you know Jesus didn't go to England, but this was a legend that at some point Jesus did go. So that's kind of what it in some way, that's what it's based on for sure. But it doesn't mean that Blake believed that, or that certainly we don't believe that. But it's still, it's a good metaphor. So with a pencil in your hand, what are you looking for? You don't really know yet. I'm going to give you that. I've got a list of questions that I'll even show you after we do this. But read it with a pencil in hand. Mark whatever you think is interesting. That's kind of the way to start here. We'll call this, usually the term I use is just close reading, in which I give you a document, a poem, a passage from a work of prose fiction, and you just mark it. You don't have any questions. You do have questions here, but in the future, you won't have any always. You just have to, what do you notice? You just need to train yourself to be looking for the things you need to look for. So you read it a second time. What I have here are some questions, and the reason I put these, because these are really the basic questions you have to ask of any poet. So let's talk about it together, then I want to show you something. Since someone tell me about the speaker of the poem, that's the first question. Notice it didn't say the poet, it's the speaker of the poem. Just remember, Mark Twain and Huck Finn are not the same person. Huck Finn is the speaker in the novel, but he's not Mark Twain. Now he reflects a lot of Mark Twain's, but Mark Twain's not a 14-year-old boy who lived pre-Civil War. So Mark Twain creates a persona, a character who speaks for him. So that's the first thing you have to figure is, sometimes all you can say, it's the poet. I think the first poem we do by Wordsworth, it's got to be Wordsworth. He actually did what is being described in the poem. Usually it's always Wordsworth. Usually it's Wordsworth. But you still have to ask the question. So what about this poet? Who is speaking? And even if you're not quite sure who to do, you can tell me what is this person like, or describe him. So anybody want to start with that? How about Julia? What do you know about the speaker?
He's like calling like the Jerusalem in England.
He is. He definitely is. What does that tell you? That's kind of an odd thing. Jerusalem, that's way over there in the Middle East. How can you build Jerusalem in England? Why would you want to do that? But what else can you say about it? Can you draw any conclusions about his these are the kind of things you've got to do. It's not the kind of thing, let's get to the good stuff. This is the good stuff. There's nothing else. This is what the course is about. It's digging into these things, not let's get to the big ideas. I don't like the details. This is about the details. I can't stress that enough. The details is what equals a 5, a 9 on those essays. So what can you dig into and find out about John? What can you tell me more? He said something about Jerusalem. What else did you notice about it?
I was gonna say like he's powerful. He's
How do you know that?
control. Like he says like bring me like 4 times, like all these different things. So it seems like he's over like people maybe.
He has some authority. Well, that's a good point. He's commanding. I wonder who is he talking to, by the way? That's the second question. We're kind of skipping ahead. You can't separate them really. Who's he talking to there? Bring me. That's a really important. I don't think anybody mentioned that the last time. I did this recently with another class. Who's he talking to there? Bring me. You know, like he's a big king. Give me this. Give me that. My mother taught me. I'm sure it was her who taught me. Don't ever ask somebody to do something that you can do yourself. Like, hey, honey, would you go get me a glass of whatever? And you know, do you have 2 feet? Do you have 2 legs? Go get it. That's I learned to do that. So if you order people around, you must have authority. That's a good point. He has some authority. What else do you know about him? Dave, tell me more about this guy. Like, what is he interested in? What does he talk about?
And like, I guess fixing England, because he talks about how it was good, like the Lamb of God was there, but now it's like, now there's like satanic mills, and they need to build like Jerusalem to kind of like fix England.
Well, very good. So, what do you see? 2 things there. He's patriotic. He mentions England at least twice. He mentions really God in some reference, in every stanza. So he's religious, he's patriotic, and he cares.
It's also anti-industrial.
Yes. Where do you see that?
Well, you don't call mills dark satanic
think of mills is that we love to go to that, whatever it's called, grist mill, whatever, on the way to Oak Ridge, you know, the one, the old mill. It's really quaint, and I don't think anything satanic about that. Of course, we're getting ahead of ourselves. Yeah, look at number 3. What we can say?
Also, the speaker references consistently the pleasant pastures and the green and pleasant land, and it's trying to contrast that to the mills specifically.
Very good.
Wow.
That takes us to number 4. What is the setting? Like, that's where the dates would help you. They will always give you the date. I know you haven't probably gotten too far into this, if at all, but what do those dates tell you? Well, you were saying it.
It's early industrial
Yeah,
revolution.
it's the Industrial Revolution. And so all those things are true. We talked about who the speaker is. We noticed we still don't know who he's talking to. But then he talks about, well, you kind of mentioned the occasion a little bit, and the setting is definitely England and the Industrial Revolution. What is the problem? What is the occasion? Does the poet feel the problem? You mentioned it already, Finley, but what is the problem? It's always helpful if there's a problem. You and I don't want problems, but we like to read about other people having problems. Clearly there's a problem. Now, poetry is not so much based on that. Fiction always is. You've got to have a problem in a story. But here there clearly seems is a problem. What is it? Yeah.
No, it's the fact that England has been like corrupted by all these mills, and you know all the land is no longer just pleasant green pastures. Now it has all these dark mills that are all outputting a bunch of smoke and just making it unpleasant.
Yeah, very good. Isn't it interesting that 3 words, or 2 words really, I think it's 3. These dark satanic mills, and it's only one time in the whole poem. One time. All he has to do is mention one time, and that it's you've heard that story about, say, a glass of water, you put some sort of deadly acid in it. It doesn't take a lot of acid, it just takes one little drop. Would you drink it? Of course you wouldn't drink it. That's how powerful it is. So in this poem, almost right in the middle of the poem, he mentions the problem. He never has to mention it again. That's enough to kind of lead us throughout the whole poem. So we know the speaker, we gave you some characteristics, we know the occasion, the problem, and we know the setting. But what about the audience? Who's he talking to? Sometimes it's just us,
Well,
but not always. That is us.
It is saying, like, at the end, so we have built.
That's right. So who is the we? That would also be part of the audience.
The fellow people that
Yeah, I think so. Now, since, who was it that brought up the bring me, the authority? Was that John? I honestly had never thought of that before. Who is he asking to do that? Who would bring him a bow? And that seems odd. How's that gonna help you fix the pollution?
It also seems like he's asking maybe perhaps God to bring him these things, because these are all godly things, the chariot of fire, the bow of burning gold, stuff like that.
Right, so you never order God around, so does it change that a little bit, that it sounds like he's ordering somebody? It's almost like a prayer, help me. You're not demanding it from God. Bring me peace, Lord. It may sound you're speaking with some authority, but you're right. I think that could, but otherwise he's also talking about England. So that's the audience. So what seems to be the purpose of the poem? Max, what do you think the purpose? We've talked about the problem, the audience, the speaker, the setting. What do you think he's trying to accomplish here?
Maybe to inspire change in a way, like
Sure.
religiously and industrially, like, cause like he poses all like the green pastures and stuff in like this good light compared to the industrial like
Right.
mills, and then also like bringing back God into England.
Yeah, and I think Finley was sort of brought it up first, but it's really important that you notice those contrasts. That's you've got to look for contrast. That's often what the writer will do. Now, the main idea and the purpose are not all that different. The main idea would be putting that, maybe Max did it as well as we could do it, putting that main idea, like putting the problem and the solution together in a statement. Somehow that statement, if you were writing about this, has to be in your essay. And this is both personal and it's also necessary. Whatever you would say about the poem, he supports it. What are some of the images? Images are the smell, taste, touch, specifically those five senses. What are some images or an image that appeals to you? Todd, give me an image that at least you pick up. Maybe you like it. Something you can smell, taste, touch, feel, hear. Doesn't have to be all of them in one image, but
I mean, maybe like the site when you do like the dark satanic mills.
Yeah.
Like,
right. And in contrast to what other image that he uses more than once?
Green pasture.
Yeah, I don't know the word green, not my favorite color, but here he uses it at least twice, maybe three times. I've heard that Ireland really is green. Have anybody ever been to Ireland? I mean, literally, the country is green. It's so lush, and so I mean, lush. You think of the this equator or South Pacific, but there are not. It is an island, and so I think England is also green. Now that's been 150 years ago, almost 200 years ago, at least 200 years ago. Anyone else have an image that you like? All right, so just flip it because we're not done. Images are also created by figures of speech. So, and that fits in with, so 8 and 9 kind of go together. One type of figure of speech that is used here are called biblical allusions. And other figures of speech are metaphors, personification, so forth. Give me one. Kayla, give me a figure of speech. Figures of speech create images. Images are pictures, mental pictures that evoke the senses, but figures of speech can also do that. Give me a figure of speech. Now, what do we mean by that? We know it's a persona, whatever, but what does that mean? When we use the term figure of speech, what are we referring to? What would a figure of speech or figurative language be?
Like what a figure of speech is, like
Yeah.
metaphor, personification.
What's the difference between this and this? Like figures of speech, you see, get the word figure. If you call it figurative language opposed to literal language, what's the difference? Ask them what's the difference.
It's figurative, like, you're not like actually, I don't know.
You're not actually what? You're on the right track.
It's figurative, like you're not actually meaning it literal, it's like you're actually meaning it.
So when you say it's not literal, what do you mean by literal? That's correct, but what do you mean by literal? Well, you said figurative is not literal, and you said actually. When you say actually,
Like figurative, you're using examples to explain it, so it's not actually like the real thing, I guess, and literal is like the actual.
I mean, this is a dumb one. I thought nobody says this anymore, but somebody go fly a kite, go jump in a lake, go jump off a building. No, you don't literally mean that. The words, if you're literal, the words, you do exactly what the word, it means exactly what the words say. So figurative doesn't mean exactly what the words say. So give me some figurative language. Things that I mentioned one earlier. Yeah.
In the poem, he talks about, at the very end, he talks about his sword sleeping, which is personification.
Well, why do we know that? It's probably not literal.
A sword doesn't have conscience, you can't sleep.
They can't
if
sleep.
you're awake.
And what about, but by the way, you mentioned those again, what about those particular implements of war? This is England, this is the Industrial Revolution, they've got steam now.
It's very
Yeah, they're not Napoleonic, which is what they've just gone through, the Napoleonic Wars. We fought our revolution, we fought the War of 1812. We know there's cannon and there's all sorts of things. So why is he talking about bows, arrows, spears, and chariots? What does that do to the poem? And he's not literal, yeah.
Well, it's like, he says it's all mental, and that's all like stuff, like from God, so it's not gonna actually be
Right.
a burning gold bow or literal like arrows and desire. It's gonna be like
Good.
mental things.
Good. Well, why didn't he say, give me my rifle, give me my cannon, give me my pistol? He could have said those that would have been a lot more relevant. You know, that's the problem with poetry, right? He's talking about things that happened years and years ago. I want relevance. So why does he suddenly change from mills to arrows?
Because he doesn't want the modern, he wants to go back to the traditional.
That's a good point. This is the old way. And also, you mentioned, Alex Davis, you mentioned the fact that it invokes the idea that God would use these. You know, this is a spiritual, mental fight, not just your normal, ordinary fight. Although when he says in the last line, bring me my sword, I always wanted to take that figurative, but could he be, well, he's still being figurative, he wouldn't use a sword. But do you think he's willing to be violent?
Perhaps.
Maybe. He says mental, but then he says sword. Sword could be words that you say as well. He probably isn't physical. So those are examples of, what about, you can't build Jerusalem, it's already built, it's still there, been around thousands of years. What does he mean, build Jerusalem? What does he mean by that? I think that's the key one. Well, there are two key ones. What do you think about that? Todd, what do you think? Why would he say build Jerusalem? That can't be literal, but what does it mean?
Maybe turn England into a holier land or something.
Of course.
Yeah.
Jerusalem is what would you call that?
A holy city.
Yeah, and what do you call the figure of speech that you say it doesn't mean literally, yeah.
It's the holy land.
Yeah, and it's a symbol of the Holy Land. It symbolizes, just like a sword, well, symbolizes military or something like that. So what about, this is really my favorite, what about the, well, that's a biblical allusion. What's an allusion? All right, you write this down. I think it should be one of the words you have. I don't know for next week. But allusion is a reference to something in the Bible, and there are four areas. Poets typically use the Bible, mythology, other literature, and history. Bible, mythology, other literature, and history. Those are, for English poets, those are typically the kinds of allusions that they make. But I'm gonna skip ahead. Actually, is the next one, but I want to play for you something. We have 5 minutes, I think, if that's right. I want to play for you something that it's more something to hear than to watch. I mean, we're gonna watch it, but and Dave, do you mind turn that on for me? Oh my gosh, David.
Shut up, Ethan.
You gotta really click it, Davis.
Gotta really click it? Yeah, there we go.
Oh my gosh.
Down at work. Stay on top of emails, documents, and more without having to stay put. Whether you're working on your computer or
This is 5 minutes long. We don't have time to watch all of it. Notice the words. walk out, which we gotta do, I'll let it play the other one that you know, God Save the Queen. But we'll see you tomorrow. Yeah, we'll see you. And bring the small book with you.
I'm so sad we didn't bring this back.
Elizabeth, I meant to talk to Matt, but we need to figure out a time to do that.
Okay.
I did have a student do it at home, and so we can do that if you'll, you gotta have a monitor. Yes, thank you.